Professor Dora has in 2023, her book, Food in a Planetary Emergency, Best in the World, in the Future of Food category of the prestigious 28th German Award. Yeah. 5 of her papers were rated by Almetric in the top 5% in the world for the social media attention they have received. Since 2013, Professor Dora regularly served as a member of different peer review panels of Australian National Health and Medical Research Council. For the period of 1975 to 2023, Scopus lists her as Australia's top author. Yeah. And the 21st, the world in the area of sustainability. So give applause to Professor Dora. Okay. And the next speaker, let me introduce first, so then maybe it takes some time in the beginning, then you have more time to speak. Okay. Now we have Professor Fazlur Rahman bin Kamsani. He is from Singapore. On the right side of me sitting here, he is a board member of the Middle East Institute at the National University of Singapore. And he possesses 30 years of experience, beginning with Singapore Government Statutory Board and extending across international firms in real estate, financial advisory, investment, and client relationship management, including working in Qatar too. So he has international reputation in his activities. He excels in business development and leadership, particularly in promoting cross-border investment and business opportunities, especially those related to the Middle East and Islamic finance. He is also an active community leader, holding several appointments, including chairman of the Racial and Religious Harmony Circle for Kembangan Chai Chi. I think he will talk about this a little bit later in his presentation. He was also appointed by Minister Masagos Zulkifli as a member of the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, atau Majelis Ugama Islam Singapura, advisory panel for Wakaf Masyarakat Singapura, or for endowment for Singapore Muslim community. So, yes, later he will talk about this a little bit. And the third speaker, now she's sitting just next beside me. Her name is Fatma Muhammad Mansur Sakir. Is it? Dr. Fatma Muhammad Mansur Sakir. She is from Canal Suez University. All right. She has PhD, Master's and Bachelor in Arabic Language Education. But she wrote his dissertation on jurisprudence of financial transaction between the interpretation of Al-Jazaz and Ibn Arabi al-Maliki at the university, Suez Canal University in 2018. Actually, she has long CV here. I want to read some of it. So, experience of teaching the science and interpretation of Quran text, Quran science, science and hadith, jurisprudence of worship and transactions, and so on here. Yes, so for without further ado of the time, I think I would like the speakers to deliver the speech, and I would like to ask the organizing committee to help us to post the material of the PowerPoint from the speakers. I think I will give the first presenter to Professor Dora. Okay. Time is yours, Professor Dora.
Okay, can everybody hear me? No? No? The mic is not on.
Not on. Well, you use this first.
Okay, is this better? Hi, everybody. Oh, as we say in Australia, good day. It's my privilege to be talking after such an amazing session that we had this morning as well as yesterday. So I feel really, really privileged to be talking about sustainability, which has been my area of passion in the last 30 years or so. Curtin University is located in Perth, Western Australia, and is named after the Australian Prime Minister during Second World War. So he is very well respected, and the university logo is "Look Ever Forward." So that's one of the speeches. John Curtin was a journalist, and one of the speeches that he gave had this vision that we should always be looking into the future. When I started working in the area of sustainability, the definition of sustainability was to think how the world is going to be 100 years from now on. So that was this long-term perspective, how we look forward into the future. Unfortunately, what has happened is that a lot of the issues that we used to discuss as happening in the future are now happening right now. And the one that I want to start with, and I had 40 slides, but I can't essentially change them from here. So you have to just trust me that I have pictures to support this. No, it's not working. It's not working. So it's fine. It's fine. So what I want to stress is that at the moment we are living not in one crisis, human crisis. We are living in a new polycrisis. This is a new word that the Cambridge Dictionary had to acknowledge in 2023, a few months ago, in September 2023. And I'll read you the definition of a polycrisis. A polycrisis is a time of great disagreement, confusion, or suffering that is caused by many different problems happening at the same time, so that they together have a very big effect. So what are these problems that are happening simultaneously? We heard about war, we heard about climate change. The ones that I also want to stress is pollution. We are generating a lot of plastics pollution, and I'm contributing myself every day, as well as spread of chemicals, toxic chemicals, use of antibiotics when not necessary, that are polluting the environment. So we have these additional problems around water and land pollution. We also have biodiversity loss. We're losing species. The extinction rate of species is as high as it has never been in the history of this planet. And the other thing that is particularly of interest to us as human beings is that in the first time in the history of our species, we are seeing decreasing life expectancies. So ever since the Industrial Revolution, people have been living longer and longer. But in the last few years, we're seeing decrease life expectancies. People are living shorter lives in countries such as the US or the UK, even in Australia. And the reason for this decreasing life expectancies is not just COVID, it's also our sedentary lifestyle, the fact that we spend too much time sitting, and working on gadgets. It's also linked to the fact that we are using foods that are probably not the best for us, for our health, and we are also dealing with mental health problems. A lot of them is associated with social isolation, with problems that we are struggling with, and losing some of the important community ties that we have. And this is where the role of religion, the role of civil society is very, very important, because if we want to improve the quality of life, we also need to stop the decreasing life expectancies. So the response to some of the problems of the polycrisis was the recognition by the United Nations that we need a new human right added to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this new human right, okay, that's working now. I'm helping you. Okay, thank you. So this new human right is the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. So what is the definition of clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is not something that is everybody would agree for, but the main important point is that all nations agreed that we need to pay attention to the environment. Australia doesn't have a National Human Rights Act, and all declarations by the United Nations are not obligatory legally, but establishing this means that we are setting a foundation for shared values and for change. So this new human right is adding to a numerous list of other rights that have been adopted since the end of the Second World War, such as against racial discrimination, torture, the rights of children, people with disabilities, rights of indigenous people. So we had all this added. And this is really essential, that we are recognizing the importance of the environment. The other area that I mentioned that I have been working with is around sustainability and sustainable development goals. That's another resolution that was adopted by the United Nations back in September 2015. They're not legally binding, but they have been guiding policy making, even in a country such as Australia, and in a state such as Western Australia, where our state budget has been linked to the 17 goals included in the global goals agenda. The Sustainable Development Goals replace the Millennium Development Goals, and what is particularly important for them is that they are considered universal and applicable to wherever you are in this world. It doesn't matter whether you're a developing country or developed country or rich country or poor country. It doesn't matter in which village or town or metropolitan area you live. These goals are equally important, and they're essential human rights, such as no hunger, no poverty, clean energy, clean water and sanitation. So they're really essential. They're not legally binding, but they're shaping the policy environment. So the new human right is adding to this spectrum, and it is something that protects the dignity and the opportunities that people have. And the next, the things that are covered in the new human right are clean air, safe climate, fresh water, access to fresh water, healthy biodiversity and ecosystems, toxic-free environments, and healthy and sustainably produced food. And everything else comes after that. Things such as energy, transport, buildings, it's subordinated to these essential 6 elements of the new human right. So how do we respond nationally and as economists to these 6 elements of clean air, water, climate. The economists essentially look at this religion called the market economy and divide the services and the goods that you have in the market economy into public and private. So the private goods are the one where the market is very good at operating. You know, you pay and you get whatever you want. But public goods such as education, healthcare, sanitation, are things that the market economy is not very good at delivering. But these public goods that I was referring to in the United Nations, the new declaration to clean, safe and sustainable environment, are also global public goods. Being a global public good means that you cannot escape. It doesn't matter where you are. You will still be affected by this public good. And a lot of these public goods have actually turned in the opposite. They are public bads. Right now, we have floods in Queensland in Australia. We have fires in Western Australia. So these are the consequences from climate change. The climate is delivering extreme weather events as public bads. So the attempt of the global community to respond to global public goods is through the United Nations various bodies and they are participating parties such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. And these two have come with the two terms that we are working very strongly about. One is achieving net zero, essentially stopping emissions, and the other one is nature positive, which relates to restoration of nature and protecting biodiversity. So I've been talking about human rights for a while, but when you think about it, the right to a clean environment is not just the right of our human species, it's the right to all living species on this planet. It's a right to the animals, many of them we have lost, but the ones that we still have, they're sentient beings. It's something that should be there should be justice for all species that inherit this planet, that we share with this planet. 5 more minutes, okay. So we need to think about this also in the way we deal with policy priorities. Next slide, please. And this is how Australia and Indonesia have been performing around the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. And I don't know, you probably can't see well, but Australia is generally ranked much higher than Indonesia, 40th out of 166 countries. Indonesia is 75th out of 166. But there are areas where Indonesia is performing much better than Australia. And the one that I want to stress is SDG 2, which says no hunger. And people look at me and say, how can you say Australia is worse than Indonesia in relation to no hunger? Australia is worse than Bangladesh in relation to no hunger. And the reason why Australia is performing worse than Indonesia is because we're dealing with obesity and overweight. We're dealing with problems that are contributing to shortened life expectancies, that are contributing to non-communicable diseases such as diabetes 2 and problems that the health system needs to cope with. And I've checked the statistics about obesity and overweight in Australia and in Indonesia. In Indonesia, it's estimated to be at 33%, while in Australia we are at 67% amongst the adult population. 67%, which is pretty sick. 7 people out of 10 have problems with their weight. And what is even more worrying is Australian children. 1 of 4 children in Australia are obese or overweight. In Indonesia, it's 1 of 5. So that's a big problem that we have, and this is linked to the food choices that we are making. And a lot of my work relates to supporting plant-rich diets. We should increase and we should keep the presence of plants in our diets because plants are really good for us. And what is amazing about plants is that they are good for storing carbon, so they're environmentally better, and some of them, such as lentils and legumes, also restore the fertility of our soil. So I will, if we can click very, very quickly through the slides towards the end, keep going, or maybe just leave this here and I'll speak, because the chair is going to chase me away. So how do we respond to this polycrisis? So we can respond by changing things individually, such as the food choices that we make. But the other thing that I want to stress is looking how are we investing and what kind of initiatives we are supporting within the economy. Innovation is really important, and we need to support innovation. And we need to support innovation that helps us deal with climate change, that helps us deal with health problems. But what are we doing? Rather than supporting innovation that improves the quality of life, we continue, and Australia is very guilty of that, we continue to support military expenses. At the moment, I looked at some of the statistics. The money that is needed to achieve all the Sustainable Development Goals across the entire globe is the equivalent to the global military expenditure. The global military expenditure in 2022 were 2.5 trillion, which is mind-blowing. And this is, if you invest this money into innovation that improves, that solves the problems of the polycrisis, we'll see a very different world. So what I'm saying, we don't need to shift all military expenses, but if we shift 10% of them towards resolving the polycrisis, we will see a much better world. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Close to Professor Dora. So we listened to her presentation. She talks about human rights, trying to define new human rights perspective and relating to the economic empowerment. So innovation is one of the keys that she already mentioned earlier. So that innovation and investment to environments is also part of the economic empowerment as we need it in our human life. All right, we move to the second speakers. We have Dr. Fazlur Rahman from NUS Singapore, and I think I will give you the floor, and I think PowerPoint is coming up. So the time is yours, Professor Fazlur Rahman.
Thank you, Professor Zainuddin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Good morning. How are you all feeling? Okay, sabah here for our friends from Egypt. Thank you for the invitation. For today's presentation, I'll be talking about economic empowerment. But just now, Professor Sahiron, when some of you here invited me also to the stage with the religious leaders, as shared by Professor Zainuddin, that I'm also wearing the other hat as chairman of the Harmony Circle for Racial and Religious Harmony in Singapore. So before I just start on the economic empowerment, I mentioned to Professor Sahiron that I have just 2 points to add to what has been discussed by the religious leaders. The first point is that in Singapore, that although we are a secular country, but we allow the freedom to practice religion in Singapore. But what's also important is that there is a legislation, Protection of Religious Harmony Act. That means nobody from any other religion can condemn or create hatred to another religion. If you post that, if you write that, if you say that, the police will come after you. So in Singapore, the government will ensure that anybody can practice a religion, be it we Muslim, Sunni, Shia, the Christians, different denominations, the Buddhists, the Hindus, you can practice your religion without fear because the government will come and protect you. That's the first point. My second point is that after living in Qatar and traveling around the Middle East, I also went to Egypt. I love Egypt. But what's happening is that whatever conflicts that happen outside our country, do not bring the conflict to our own country. That's very important. Just take this existing Gaza issue. Before October 7, the Jewish community invited us to the Sukkot. Sukkot is part of the Jewish celebration. So we went to the synagogue. I'm a good friend of the chief rabbi, Mordechai. So he invited us. Even the Mufti of Singapore was invited. So we went there. Unfortunately, October 7 happened. But what's important is that in Singapore, the Jewish community, the Muslims, the Christians, and all other religions, we ensure that whatever happened outside Singapore, we do not bring the conflict to Singapore because that will affect our peaceful coexistence, our racial and religious harmony in Singapore. So those are just the 2 points which I would like to add. So now coming back to my presentation for today's conference, we talk about economic empowerment. And for us as Muslims, what's important is that a humble sharing from Singapore. Singapore, as you know, is a small country with a small Muslim population of only 15%, 500,000. But what we have done, we have pioneered Waqaf rejuvenation. In fact, when I was invited to present a paper in Dubai in 2002, after I presented a few of them from the Islamic banks, including Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah, and a few of the Middle East banks came to me. He said, Mr. Fazlul, you're from Singapore. You are doing this in Singapore. So I told him that because Singapore is going through urbanization, we have to respond. So let me just run through some of the points which I hope to share, and later on maybe we can discuss further.
You did it so well for me.
Yeah. Okay, kalau if whoever is controlling the slides, can you maybe just help me? Okay, so what I would like to share, just like in Indonesia and Nusantara, okay, just the background is that there are a lot of waqaf that actually been created by the Hadramis. And they came from Yemen, from Hadramaut specifically, and they came to this part of the world, they came to Aceh, they came to Nusantara, Singapore, Malaysia. So they created waqaf, right? So, hang on. Those controlling the slide, let me just tell you and then you just move, if you don't mind. So what has happened is that they have created waqaf, and some of this waqaf, okay, waqaf is a religious injunction that is guided by the Sharia. But what's important that we have to understand, because I'm coming from a real estate economic background, is that it's about real estate. It's about location, location, location. So how are we able to maximize the value of our waqaf? Because what has happened in Singapore, when the Hadramis and the Indian Muslims who came to Singapore, they created waqaf. Many of them are shop houses. Shop houses means shops on the ground floor and they have residents on the upper floor. And some of them are managed by families. And they are not doing well. The waqaf has been created for the purpose of the contribution to a masjid, to madrasa, or to the families. But what has happened is that they are not managed properly. So what has happened in Singapore, the good thing is that although Singapore is a secular country, for those who don't understand, Singapore, because of the British, the good legacy is that when they left, we have the Administration of Muslim Law Act, AMLA, in Singapore. Only the Muslims have it. And we have Majlis Ugama Islam Singapura, which is a statutory board under the ministry. And we have a mufti. These are all civil servants. That means only the Muslims have this. So what has happened is that the Majlis Ugama Islam Singapura amended the AMLA, the Administration of Muslim Law Act, to put all the wakaf under MUIS. So that's the first action to be done. The second action that was done is that because this involved real estate, so they actually did a tender, and DTZ, which is International Property Company in UK, got the job. So what happened is that I was actually in the government, I was a volunteer. But when DTZ got the job, the chairman says, Fazlo, why don't you help us? So I left the government to join DTZ as the portfolio manager. So what has happened is that when we look at the wakaf, we did a valuation audit. And we created 3 strategies. Okay, the first strategy is that we look at the wakaf, those with existing condition, how are we able to improve the rental income? Because what's important is that when we look at wakaf, in Singapore's context, how are we able to increase the rental income to benefit the beneficiaries? So that's the first strategy. So what has happened is that the second strategy is about asset renewal. Okay? And then the third one is redevelopment of wakaf. Next slide. Next slide, please. This, yeah, okay. Okay. So this is just to show the dilapidated wakaf shop houses. So what we did was, because they can generate better income, we did some refurbishment, and then we got new tenants so that it will generate better income for the wakaf. So that's the first strategy. Okay, the second strategy is that if some of you have been in Singapore, the famous Raffles Hotel, there's a 6-story office building that was put up for sale. So what we did was we knew the future location of that area, and we say, let's buy this building. So we bought that building, but what we need to do is that we have to have some funds to acquire it. So there are 2 parts to it. The first part is what we call the concept of istibdal. Okay, this is where in Singapore we have a progressive fatwa committee with the mufti. We as professionals, we explain to the mufti, the fatwa committee, that we need to do this to enhance the returns from the wakaf. So the committee, the fatwa committee decided that we identify a few shop houses that is not performing, that we do a long list. Because remember, wakaf we cannot sell, but we can do a long list. So we did a long list, and some of the proceeds, this is istibdal. Istibdal was the concept by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. So that is a concept that is actually has its precedence, but whether we Muslims would like to apply it. And I share with you because the challenges when I travel to other Muslim countries and they told me, because their fatwa committee has a different opinion for the purpose of the wakaf. So what has happened is that then we needed to raise some funding, and we did the first Islamic bond, the sukuk. We call it sukuk musyarakah in ijara in Singapore. So that was part of the strategy. The technicalities are here. I will maybe share later on if some of you are interested with the details of the terms and the bond structure. Okay, I wanted to show, so this was the existing building. Next to it is the Raffles Hotel. So we bought it, we refurbished it, so that we can generate better rental income. So this is now part of the wakaf in Singapore. The next strategy is what we do, a redevelopment. So in Singapore, we have an old masjid, Masjid Bencoolen. I'll show you the photo. Okay, so if some of you have been to Singapore, it's near to Singapore Management University, the Bencoolen area. There's an old masjid, Masjid Bencoolen. So what we have done, because in Singapore, as I shared earlier, the government has this rapid urbanization program. Because Singapore is such a small country, 700 square kilometers. So sometimes, and this has happened, and it really affected me when I was a student in Raffles Institution in 1980s. If you've been to Singapore, Orchard Road is the famous shopping area in Singapore, Orchard Road. Wheelock Place, opposite Ion Orchard, Wheelock Place was a masjid, Masjid Anggulia. Okay? But the government acquired the masjid for the purpose of the MRT. But the MRT is now opposite the road at Ion Orchard. But that's what the government can do. They have the Land Acquisition Act. So if we Muslims do not respond with the government's urbanization program, then our Waqaf land may be acquired for public purpose. So what we have done is that we have this Masjid Bencoolen. We discuss and we explain to the Fatwa Committee that we need to redevelop this masjid. So what's interesting, if you are now come to Singapore, please visit this Masjid Bencoolen. So what we have redeveloped it, because of sensitivity, the masjid will have to retain on its own. But because we wanted to improve the rental income for the proceeds to the Waqaf, so we built a 3-story commercial next to the masjid and a 12-story apartment with 84 units as service apartment. And we managed to get the Escort Group, which is very big here in Indonesia, under Somerset Bencoolen. So they operate as a service apartment. And that is one of the best assets that they have because the location is near to Singapore Management University. So many lecturers, professors who are staying there, they provided the rental income. So this is what we have done, a redevelopment effort from just a masjid to a 3-story commercial with shop houses and a 12-story apartment with 84 units. And we managed to get the Escort Group to commit a contract with annual lease of 1.8 million. So part of it, and then to finance the reconstruction, so we actually issued another Islamic sukuk for the redevelopment. So what I'm trying to share is that in Singapore, we have to respond. And after this, we also did some redevelopment. Okay, this is a prime area in Singapore. These are residential area. So we redevelop it as cluster housing for the Waqaf. And of course, there are some other new initiatives which I went to Malaysia and then to China to discuss about how are they able to develop the Waqaf. So what I'm trying to share is that for us Muslims, when we look at Waqaf, it's not just, okay, for last time when we have the older generation, they have the money, they have the asset, they have the properties. So, but for us now, we do not have that. But what we can do is that we need to evaluate where are some of these Waqaf, where are we able to redevelop it to generate income. I give an example. Because the Waqaf redevelopment, as I mentioned, is not just about the Sharia. Yes, when a person dedicates a Waqaf, it's for a specific purpose. But we must also be able to generate the income for that purpose. So for example, I went to Brunei, and then there's an area called Gadong. Gadong is a commercial area. But there's also a land that has been dedicated for Waqaf Masjid. But unfortunately, that land cannot be developed because there's already a masjid nearby, and that area, they say there's no need for another masjid. So what has happened is that unfortunately, that area is a commercial area, but that land could not be developed because the intention is for a masjid. So I was invited to present to the Deputy Mufti at that time. And also I explained, if that area is a commercial area, why don't we build a commercial on the land, but the income goes to the masjid? So he says, Cik Fazlul, this is a good idea, but we cannot implement it in Brunei because we have a very strict Sharia guidelines. If a wakaf is for masjid, we have to build a masjid. So this is sometimes the problem, right? That we Muslims will have to discuss with the ulama to explain to them that we need to create the benefit for the wakaf. So as I explained earlier, a wakaf, besides the religious Sharia guidelines, is also about location, location, location. How are we able to unlock the value of the land, the wakaf, so that we can generate a higher income for the wakaf? 3 minutes. Yeah, so this is what I am very passionate about, and I hope that with this year's conference, when we talk about economic empowerment, wakaf is an area, and mashallah, Indonesia is a huge Muslim country. There's a lot of potential that we can actually look at how we can redevelop our wakaf that will benefit the masyarakat, the ummah. I was also invited to Istanbul to present a paper, and it was interesting because after I presented the paper, Professor Murad Cijaska, he's one of the pioneers in wakaf, and he wrote a book. He came to me, he says, Mr. Fazlul, let me bring you to see real wakaf in Turkey. That was done during the Ottoman. So he brought me to Fatih University, Fatih Hospital. These are wakaf that is funding public infrastructure projects. So can we imagine many our public projects, we need funding from the government. But the government today is fully stretched with so many demands, including what Professor Dora mentioned about sustainable development, climate change. So if we as Muslims are able to empower ourselves to fund infrastructure projects, our own universities, our own hospitals, our own public institutions using wakaf, then we will help the government to put aside the funds for other important infrastructure, social programs for the people. So that is one aspect that I'm trying to share. So the other part is that in Singapore, as mentioned by Professor Zainuddin just now, the Minister in charge of Muslim Affairs, Mr. Masagos Zulkifli, they created a committee to look at Wakaf Masyarakat Singapura. Okay, this is where, because as I mentioned, our forefathers, they have the money, they have the land for Wakaf. But for us now, land is expensive. So we do not have the funds. So what we do is now we collectively put our fund together for the wakaf, and we can buy commercial assets. And that is our niyan, our intention is for wakaf, to help our madrasah, to help our ulama, to help the Muslims community. So to me, I think this is an empowerment for us Muslims to think about that we have the asset, we have our religious guideline, but how do we respond to the challenges of today that we can benefit the ummah? Inshallah. Wallahu a'lam bissawab. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Give applause to Dr. Fazlur Rahman. Very interesting. Thank you so much. And he talks about the potential of wakaf for Muslims. As in Islam, there is a concept, very well-known concept in Islam about economic empowerment. And wakaf is one of the solutions. And he speaks about the experience in Singapore, actually. Very interesting. And he proposed about the wakaf rejuvenation. pembaruan wakaf. We have to have innovation in doing wakaf so that wakaf is more powerful to empower the economic of ummah for the benefit of human beings. All right, we move to our next speaker, the last speaker. Here we have Dr. Fatma, and she will be speak in في اللغة العربية. Okay, تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أحييكم بتحية الإسلام. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
قبل أن أبدأ أقدم التحية والتقدير والشكر للسادة القائمين على هذا المؤتمر العلمي الرصين وللمنصة العلمية الراقية وللحضور الكريم. الحمد لله الذي دعا إلى الاقتصاد في كل شيء، فقال تعالى: واقصد في مشيك. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم الذي قال: ما عال من اقتصد، وقال: لا تسرف من الماء ولو كنت على نهر جار. وبعد، فإن موضوع التمكين من الموضوعات التي تتعلق بها قلوب العباد وتتحرك نحوها للاستخبار والاستبصار، لكونهم يوقنون بوعد الله لهم بالتمكين، ويفتقدون في ذات الوقت الصورة الكاملة المحيطة بهذا الوعد. والتمكين سنة من سنن الله تسري على المؤمن والكافر، فالله عز وجل أعطى ويعطي التمكين للأمم المسلمة وأيضا للأمم الكافرة. ومن أمثلة التمكين الذي أعطاه الله تعالى للأمم المسلمة تمكين الله تعالى ليوسف عليه السلام ولسليمان وذي القرنين، ثم للأمة الإسلامية جميعا. فيوسف عليه السلام مكن الله له تمكينا بعد تمكين. قال تعالى في سورة يوسف: وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض ولنعلمه من تأويل الأحاديث. ويقول تعالى: وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض يتبوأ منها. وأخبر تعالى أنه أعطى سليمان من كل شيء، وهذا غاية التمكين. يقول تعالى: وورث سليمان داود وقال: يا أيها الناس علمنا منطق الطير وأوتينا من كل شيء. وقال عن ذي القرنين: إنا مكنا له في الأرض وآتيناه من كل شيء سببا. وعن هذه الأمة يقول الله تعالى: واذكروا إذ أنتم قليل مستضعفون في الأرض تخافون أن يتخطفكم الناس فآواكم وأيدكم بنصره. أما ما أعطاه الله تعالى من التمكين للأمم الكافرة فكثير ذكره في القرآن. يقول الله تعالى مستنكرا على عاد قوم هود انحرافهم بما مكن الله لهم عن الجادة، ومعددا مظاهر التمكين الذي وهبه لهم: أتبنون بكل ريع آية تعبثون. وأيضا يقول الله تعالى: ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد. وقوله تعالى: ولقد مكناهم فيما إن مكناكم فيه. فالتمكين لا يقتصر فقط على المسلم، وإنما أعطى الله عز وجل التمكين للأمم غير المسلمة إذا أخذوا بالقوانين الإلهية، ومن حاد عن هذه القوانين الإلهية والسنن الكونية صلب الله عز وجل عنه هذا التمكين. من هنا يتبين لنا أن الهدف من التمكين في الإسلام هو الإعمار والتنمية وتحقيق الصلاح في هذا الكون الذي خلق الله عز وجل فيه الإنسان من أجل هذه المهمة العظيمة، تحقيقا للأمن والسلام والعدالة الاجتماعية. ومن بين أنواع التمكين التمكين الاقتصادي، ومنطلقه في القرآن الإيمان بالله، وقد كان هذا الشعار هو المشترك الدعوي بين جميع الأنبياء عليهم السلام. قال تعالى: لقد أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه فقال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره. ومن هذا المنطلق رفع شعيب عليه السلام شعار الإصلاح في قوله تعالى: وما أريد أن أخالفكم إلى ما أنهاكم عنه إن أريد إلا الإصلاح ما استطعت وما توفيقي إلا بالله. فقد بعثه الله لمعالجة الانحراف الاقتصادي، وخاصة قضية التطفيف في الكيل والميزان، وهو في ظاهره عدل وميزان، وفي باطنه أكل لأموال الناس بالباطل. من هنا فإن الإيمان هو الأساس الذي يقوم عليه الاقتصاد. الله عز وجل يعالج الانحراف من أجل التمكين، لأنه تعالى أراد الخير لهذه الأمة كما أرادها لبقية الأمم. ولما كان الإيمان هو الأساس الذي يقوم عليه التفاضل بين البشر، فلم يفرق الإسلام بين الذكر والأنثى في الحقوق. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. وكذلك لما كانت الأنثى هي شريك الرجل في هذا الكون، فقد دعا الإسلام إلى تمكين المرأة وكفل لها جميع الحقوق. ومن بين أنواع التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة، وذلك من خلال تنمية قدرات المرأة ومهاراتها على كافة المستويات. لذا جاء هذا البحث بعنوان التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة من منظور إسلامي، لبيان دور الإسلام في تمكين المرأة اقتصادياً ودحض الشبهات المثارة حول موقف الإسلام من المرأة. فالتمكين كمصطلح ليس حديثاً كما يدعي البعض، فقد استخدم القرآن الكريم التمكين كمصطلح ومفهوم، فوردت لفظة التمكين في أكثر من موضع في القرآن كما بينا. من هنا يتبين لنا أن الإسلام كان أسبق من كل العلوم والأنظمة في استخدام مصطلح التمكين. ويرى الطاهر بن عاشور في التحرير والتنوير عند تفسيره لقوله تعالى: مكناهم في الأرض، أن التمكين جعل الشيء في مكان، وهو يطلق على الإقدار على التصرف على سبيل الكناية. من هنا يتضح أن التمكين مصطلح قرآني سبق إليه الإسلام كل العلوم والأنظمة. والتمكين الاقتصادي يقصد به توفير الدعم المباشر للناس لزيادة الدخل ومستويات المعيشة، ويهدف إلى بناء دولة قوية تحمي رعاياها من الصراع والتطرف والفقر بكل أشكاله. وهذا ما بينه القرآن الكريم من خلال كشف العلاقة بين سورتي الفيل وقريش، وهي علاقة تمكين اقتصادي بعد التمكين العسكري. ومن هنا يتضح أن التمكين الاقتصادي يخدم ويدعم بناء الدول من الداخل، ويدعم بناء السلام والأمن والعمل الإنساني. وهذا ما ذكره القرآن الكريم من تمكين الدين ليمكن بناء الدولة اقتصاديا وأمنيا وسياسيا. قال تعالى: وليمكنن لهم دينهم. والتمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة هي عملية يمكن للمرأة بموجبها زيادة قدرتها وضبطها للموارد الاقتصادية والمالية الأساسية كرأس المال والأجور والأملاك العينية، مما يساعد في انتقالها من موقع اقتصادي أدنى في المجتمع إلى قوة اقتصادية أعلى، ويمنحها استقلالية مادية في الدرجة الأولى. ونحب أن نؤكد أن التمكين يكون للمرأة الكفء صاحبة الخبرة والدراية، وليس المطلوب حضور المرأة لمجرد أنها امرأة، وبالتالي لا بد من التدريب والتأهيل وإعطاء الفرص لهن. والتمكين الاقتصادي ليس دعوة للنفع والكسب وتحقيق التضخم المالي والطبقية، بل هو دعوة لممارسة الإعمار وفق مبادئ الحق وسننه، وتنمية الاقتصاد وتحقيق العدالة الاجتماعية وفق القيم الإسلامية. ولما كان التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة هو تنمية قدرات المرأة لتوسيع خيارات العمل أمامها وزيادة مشاركتها في قوة العمل وتحقيق تكافؤ الفرص في توظيف النساء، وبالتالي لا يؤثر التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة على التنمية الاقتصادية فحسب، بل يمتد إلى التنمية الاجتماعية بدءا من الأسرة التي تعيش فيها ووصولا إلى المجتمعات أو البلدان التي تنتمي إليها وغير ذلك من المجالات. فإن التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة له أهمية كبيرة، منها أولا تحقيق التوازن في فرص العمل بين الجنسين. إن مشاركة المرأة في سوق العمل بشكل متوازن مع الرجل تعد جزءا من خطة التنمية المستدامة، فمفهوم التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة يفسح لها الوصول إلى الموارد الاقتصادية في السوق والتحكم في تلك الموارد والحصول على عمل يتناسب مع رغبتها ومهاراتها. ثانيا بناء أسرة أصح وأسعد، حيث تحصل المرأة على فرصتها في سوق العمل فإنها تعيش حياة مرضية وأكثر إنتاجية. ثالثاً تحقيق النمو الاقتصادي، يزيد التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة من الإنتاجية ويسهم في زيادة التنويع الاقتصادي ورفع مستوى الأداء التنظيمي في الشركات والمؤسسات بسبب المهارات التنظيمية التي تمتلكها المرأة وهو ما يحقق دخلا أعلى على المدى البعيد، ويعزز النمو الاقتصادي في البلاد التي تعنى بهذا المفهوم. رابعاً، تمكين المرأة في الدول النامية أمر أساسي لتقليل الفقر العالمي، وذلك لكون النساء يشكلن جزءاً كبيراً من عدد الفقراء في العالم. من هنا يتضح أن التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة الواعية التي تمتلك القدرات والمهارات التي تؤهلها إلى ذلك له أهمية كبيرة على المستويين المحلي والعالمي، مما يؤدي إلى تحقيق العدالة الاجتماعية والسلام. وقد أقرت الشريعة الإسلامية أهمية التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة وأحقيتها في ذلك بصورة تخالف ما عليه الغرب واتهامه للإسلام بظلمها مادياً وغير ذلك. فقد أعطى الإسلام المرأة استقلالها التام عن الرجل من الناحية الاقتصادية، وقرر مبدأ التكافؤ بينهما فيما يتصل بحرية التعاقد والتصرف المالي فيما يملكه كل منهما. وهذا ما رأيناه من السيدة خديجة عندما تزوجها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، فقد وصفت بكونها أول سيدة أعمال أو أول رائدة أعمال في الإسلام. وكذلك الشفاء أول وزيرة للتجارة في عهد عمر بن الخطاب، فقد كان عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه وأرضاه يقدمها في الرأي ويرعاها ويفضلها. ولتحقيق التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة آليات من أهمها: أولاً، زيادة فرص التعليم للمرأة. يعد التعليم الخطوة الأولى في التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة، إذ يعزز التعليم بناء المهارات لمواكبة التطورات التكنولوجية وتحديات سوق العمل، مما يؤدي إلى مشاركة أفضل للمرأة في سوق العمل. ثانياً، توفير برامج تسهل على المرأة مشاركتها في سوق العمل، فقد تواجه المرأة بعض العقبات أمام دخولها إلى سوق العمل والاستمرار فيه، وعلى الدول مساعدتها وتمكينها اقتصادياً في المجتمع لتحقيق الاستقرار الوظيفي بها. ثالثاً، دعم رائدات الأعمال. حتى تصل الحكومات إلى تمكين المرأة اقتصادياً، عليها أن تدعم ريادة الأعمال النسائية، ومن هنا تلعب رائدات الأعمال دوراً ملحوظاً في قطاع المنشآت الصغيرة والمتوسطة. ويمكن للدولة أن تساعد في تطوير أنشطة المنشآت الصغيرة والمتوسطة وتوسيع المجالات من خلال دعمها للحصول على التمويل اللازم لتحقيق ذلك. رابعاً، تعميق التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة المسلمة وتفعيله عبر تطوير مفاهيم التكافؤ والمشاركة واقتلاع تأثير بعض الإيحاءات المجتمعية السلبية. وللتمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة معوقات تواجهه، منها: 1. ما هو ذاتي، من حيث عدم الرغبة من قبل المرأة نفسها ليضعف تعلمها، وبالتالي يؤثر على تمكين المرأة اقتصادياً. ومنها ما هو مجتمعي، بمعنى عدم تعاون المجتمع مع المرأة أو تعمده بعدم الاهتمام بتعلمها. وأيضاً من هذه المعوقات ما هو ثقافي، بمعنى الضعف الثقافي للبيئة المحيطة بها سواء المحلية أو العالمية. وهناك معوق اقتصادي، بمعنى ضعف الخبرة الاقتصادية لديها، مما يؤدي إلى عدم القدرة في خوض غمار التمكين الاقتصادي. وهناك معوقات مرتبطة ببيئة العمل، حيث تختلف بيئة العمل من منطقة إلى أخرى ومن بلد إلى آخر. وأيضا هناك معوقات أسرية تقف أمام تحقيق التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة، فهي مرتبطة بالزوج والأبناء لانشغالها بتربية الأبناء وتعليمهم ورعايتهم. وتكمن العادات الثقافية أيضا، والعديد من النساء يعانين من ضغوطات هذه العادات، بينما اعتادت بعض النساء على معاملتهن كمخلوق أدنى منزلة من الرجل. ومن أهم النتائج التي توصل إليها هذا البحث أن الإسلام كان له الأسبقية في استخدام مصطلح التمكين من أي أنظمة أخرى كما يدعي الغرب. ثانياً، الإسلام كفل للمرأة حق التمكين الاقتصادي وحث عليه. ثالثاً، التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة يلعب دوراً كبيراً في التنمية المستدامة، وبالتالي يلعب دوراً كبيراً في تحقيق العدالة الاجتماعية والسلام العالمي. رابعاً، تتنوع المعوقات التي تواجه التمكين الاقتصادي للمرأة المسلمة ما بين معوقات ذاتية وثقافية واقتصادية ومجتمعية. خامساً، إقصاء جزءاً كبيراً من القوى العاملة لدولة ما على أساس الجنس فقط له آثار سلبية على الاقتصاد المحلي والعالمي. وشكرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Dr. Padma. We understand that in Islam, there's a concept, according to her presentation, about the empowerment of women. And Islam already mentioned and have the concept itself, which is called takwim, takwim, yeah. So that is a concept that is mentioned in the Quran, how to empower women. But in practice, to empower women for economical support or access, they have at least 10 barriers. And then the 10 barriers are including cultural barriers, like men, proud to be men, not to be woman, and man is more superior than women. And women themselves do not understand the concept that they can empower themselves, to empower themselves for their life. So this is some of the barriers that women should overcome, so that women can understand better about the empowerment of themselves, the empowerment of women for humanity, for ummah too. So that if a Muslim have power of economic, then can better help Muslim to a better life actually. So that is part of the issues that she already focused on her presentation. And I think we are now at 11:35 and we are approaching the Jum'ah time. I don't know, I'm not sure whether we have to take some questions or not. I need to ask steering committee, should we take some questions from the audience? What time is the Jum'ah time? I think I just decide that because it is 11:36 and the Jum'ah time, the prayer time is maybe 11:45. So very, very tight, very tough time, right? So I think we conclude in this session. And for the conclusion, maybe I would like to mention that for benefit of humankind, of human life, of global humanity, we need to empower economic aspect, empower the value of religions. And because in every religion they have their own concept of economic empowerment, like mentioned by Dr. Padma, also explained by Dr. Fazlur Rahman. And Professor Dora also mentioned how to empower the human right with new perspective in sustainable way, so that the economic power can support our life and support a better life for humanity as well. So I think that is what we can say today in this session. And thank you so much for our audience today being with us until this time. And thank you so much for the speakers who already shared very great insights with us. Of course, we learned very much from you all. So again, thank you so much, and we will meet again in another session maybe, yeah? Okay, again, thank you so much, and give applause to this plenary session. We'll close again. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for all the speakers for a very engaging presentation about empowerment of economic. So next we are going to have a break. So ada Q&A? Ya, ada kan? Okay. So we are going to have a break. We will please you. Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Okay, so before we move to the break session, we are going to have a token of appreciation first for the speakers in first plenary session. So please. Yes, we are kindly invite our rector to deliver the token of appreciation. Okay, Bapak Ibu, once again, please give the biggest applause to all the speakers. Thank you very much. Highest appreciation to you all. Thank you very much. Well, Bapak Ibu partisipan, setelah ini kami mempersilahkan Bapak Ibu untuk melaksanakan ibadah sholat Jumat dan kami minta untuk kembali bergabung tepat di jam 1 karena kita akan melanjutkan dengan parallel session. Setelah itu